I'm really enjoying watching what happens to your bodies when we make you turn and change. I know that you can get really sedentary at these kinds of settings, so we programmed it in just to kind of oxygenate your blood every once in a while, so you don't have to go to cardio this afternoon. I think it was really fascinating. That was fantastic talk, both of you guys, but I was particularly fascinated by the slide that showed the journey of companies that led to Elemental. I remember reading in Richard Florida's book, The Rise of the Creative Class, maybe 12 years ago, where his research showed that the greatest predictor of economic vitality today is density of high-tech companies. And you see that's a great example of how it fosters not only health for Intel, but it brings talent to the region that then creates new enterprises, and that helps all of us. We're going to shift now from high-tech to manufacturing. And high-tech in Oregon is doing quite well in compared to some regions. Manufacturing is doing amazingly well. And it is one of the highest, we have one of the highest percentages, manufacturing represents one of the highest percentages per capita or per jobs of any state in the country, which was kind of an astounding thing for me to read about. It's because we make things here. You read stories in the press about how America's time of leading the world as a manufacturer is in the dustbin. That's not what things look like in Oregon. We still succeed at making things here, and we're about to hear three quite contrasting and interesting stories to that effect. We're going to hear from Udo Ryder from Erickson Aircrane, who are one of the largest manufacturers of helicopters in the world. We're also going to hear from Patrick Kreitzer from Tillamook, who promised that he would bring ice cream to his presentation. And so if he doesn't, that's all on him. But we're going to start with the timber industry. And, the story, I think, in Oregon is that timber built this state. You look back at 1905 and the World's Fair and the region, that there was enough economic vitality in this region to think that we warranted the right to host the World's Fair was really because of the wealth and prosperity that timber had built in this region. And a lot of struggles over the last couple of decades, given the federal regulations on our forest and also on the housing crash. And that story's changing. There's a lot of promise in the horizon. And the mention that John made earlier about the intractability of the environmental camp with the timber camp, that's a kind of an old story. It's an old paradigm. And I love that our next presenter, Eric Schooler, who's the CEO at the Collins Company, in our conversation said that really a ceasefire has happened, and we're really working together in much more creative ways. So Eric, if you would come and join us and talk to us about what's happening in the timber industry.
A quick announcement before I begin. The piano player has left the building, so I'll be doing this a cappella. Today I'm representing manufacturing. On other days I represent the Collins companies, manufacturing in Lakeview, Boardman, Oregon, and 2 plants in Klamath Falls, as well as plants in California, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. And I represent sustainable forestry. Collins has been investing and growing trees for almost 160 years. So now to the topic. The wood products manufacturing industry is not what you may think. I wish more of you had the opportunity to see what a modern mill can do. We have evolved at about the same rate as the high-tech business in Oregon. High-tech creates technology, and our industry adapts and applies that technology. So when you hear about the timber business demise, don't believe it. It has always been the driver for many of our rural communities and will for many decades to come. Essentially, every machine in our facilities are automated, and almost every decision about cutting a log or making a panel is made by computers. As a result, our mills are safer, more efficient, and yield more from every single log. Improvement is our passion. Oregon mills are world-class. This is a great industry. Creating sustainable building products is a noble profession. A little Oregon history. Oregon became a great place because of its natural resources: trees, rivers, beavers, fish, the great outdoors. Much of Oregon was built on the wealth of timber, and timber continues to play a huge role as foundations such as the Collins and Ford family and dozens of others support the arts, scholarships, and new buildings. Much of it in Oregon's urban areas like Portland, Eugene, and Corvallis, but also in our rural communities. Timber is unique in that it is renewable in one lifetime. Urban sprawl and rural construction have reduced the number of timbered acres in Oregon, but even with the lost acres and with all the jobs and structures that have come from Oregon's forest, we have more tree volume today than 60 years ago, my lifetime. That is sustainability. Forestry, lumber, and wood products manufacturing create and sustain jobs. Jobs of all types, family wage jobs and better, entry level all the way to PhDs. Oregon is the largest wood producing state in the United States. Oregon State University is the best forestry and wood science school in the nation. They are producing our future leaders. Our manufacturing facilities of today are automated, capital-intensive factories that accomplish the unthinkable even 20 years ago. Scanners, computers, optimizers, PLCs, controllers, and VFDs dominate the mills. Most workers are operators, not laborers, and these operators essentially are there to oversee the process flow. The key jobs in our mills are the creators and maintainers of the machine controls and optimizers. Historically, these key employees were homemade, on-the-job training. Today, with the added complexity, these key employees are best trained or created in formal apprenticeship programs. Oregon's community colleges do a terrific job of establishing the curriculum and on-site training for accredited apprenticeship programs. This industry education partnership is extremely important, creating a great opportunity for young, creative, energetic folks that just don't seek the book learning of a college degree. This is a photo of our Klamath Falls folks that have completed or are currently in an apprenticeship program. These are great folks with a great future. Much of our industry future workforce is dependent on the continued work at OSU and our rural community colleges. We need to support them. So what are our challenges today and tomorrow? The U.S. is starting to recover from the worst housing market since the Great Depression. 2005 was a high water mark with more than 2 million housing starts. Then the bust. From 2009 through 2011, we averaged only 580,000 housing starts. That's a disaster. Even so, Oregon has a strong and vibrant woodworking manufacturing industry. In 2013, we are finally seeing some resurgence with 900,000 housing starts. 2014 is expected to be around 1.1 million housing starts. We still have a ways to go to get back to the norm, which is about 1.5 million housing starts, but the direction is definitely up. So with increasing housing starts and an efficient manufacturing infrastructure, Oregon's timber and wood products sector has great potential just ahead of us. We are ready, but will we be able to play in the game? Timber supply is the number one question. Where will the logs to run our mills come from? Oregon has a tremendous resource, millions of acres of timber. About half of those acres are federally owned and have been essentially shut down since the early 1990s and the Clinton Timber Summit. As a result, private forest land and to a lesser degree state lands have generated the logs for our mills. Logs from private sources and state-owned public lands have been able to match the demand in this low market. Inevitably, the housing starts come back, and as I said, they already have, and add a challenge in the surge in export of coastal logs to Asia. So where will the timber to produce logs to make lumber come from? Oregon's private lands have been producing at sustainable amounts of timber for nearly 30 years, and there is very little capacity to increase that amount. If not Oregon, then where? Russia or the rainforest or any other non-sustainable region? Oregon has outstanding growing conditions, strict environmental and sustainability requirements, including mandated replanting. all the environmental sensitive requirements for good forest health, and then we close down shop and send our jobs elsewhere when elsewhere is far less environmentally conscious. With global environment and local jobs on the line, we must find ways to increase Oregon's overall forest resource usage. Good forestry is not dictated by ownership lines. For me, the biggest blight on our forests is that we are not actively managing them for all the values, economic, social, and environmental. As a result, our forests are more susceptible to fire, insects, and disease. Unfortunately, overdense forests lead to insects, which lead to dead trees, which leads to catastrophic fire, which threatens the ecological benefits we all love about forests: clean air, clean water, fish and wildlife habitat, recreational opportunities, and yes, wood products are most environmentally friendly building products. Unfortunately, I can speak to catastrophic wildfire. In 2012, the Berry Point fire came to Collins. This is a picture of that fire in its beginning. 94,000 acres burned. 60,000 acres were on federal forest, 24,000 on Collins land, and another 10,000 on other private. The fire started by lightning on unmanaged Forest Service land. The fire grew and at one point burned 30,000 acres in one day. That's a bad day. By the time the fire got to the Collins lands, it was miles wide and moving like a freight train, with no possibility of controlling it. Essentially, the fire only died out due to lack of trees to burn, as it had found the desert and another area that had been burned a few years before. This is what the fire left. Federal forests are shut down, but the trees and the understory and biomass grow on. Too much woody debris, dry lightning, maybe the effects of climate change. Regardless, our east side forests are experiencing devastating, increasingly larger fires year after year. 2013 was again a record year for firefighting. 50% of the federal the Forest Service annual budget goes to fighting fires. 50% of their budget is for fighting fires. The state of Oregon spent $120 million fighting fires this year alone. So 2 points. We must continue and expand our federal forest rehabilitation. Healthy forests, managed forests, are more resilient to fires, and yes, healthy forests grow bigger, better trees faster. This is an example of a stewardship contract. I got one from the winter, so we'd all feel good today. The idea here is to thin out overpopulated area with too much understory. This is partway through the project, and here you see it completed. Now here is a similar show in the summer. We're transforming overcrowded, stressed forest land and here the end product: less biomass, fire resistant, and more safe growing. If we do this, we can avoid the following fires. That's the goal. We also need to address the aftermath of large-scale fires. Immediate harvesting and replanting of burned acres ensures efficient return to healthy forest land. Burned acres left to naturally regenerate become moonscapes, are susceptible to invasive species, and are dangerous. A closer example to home: next time you cross Santiam Pass, look at the aftermath of the B&B complex fire. What a mess, what a waste. Oregon's private lands, like Collins, are handled much differently. Post-fire, we salvage, replant, and then grow. Not much different than a smaller west side clear cut. Collins lands salvaged immediately after the fire. Obviously devastation, but we're getting Mother Nature back to work. But you can see in the aftermath of the fire, there were almost no living trees. Unfortunately, you would find as much as 5,000 and 6,000 virtual clear-cut acres where the fire was. Burned timber is perfectly useful after a fire, but it degrades quickly. Forest health is a huge problem, and I need to thank our congressional delegation for their efforts. This is a big challenge, and with the leadership Oregon currently enjoys in Congress, now is the time to tackle it. 2014 is the time. We have a strong delegation, as I said, and with housing starts finally improving, Oregon needs to be prepared for more jobs and improving economy. Senator Wyden's East Side bill, the ONC bill, the Walden-DeFazio and Schroeder bill are all examples of trying to move the ball down the road, and we thank you for those challenging, or for taking on those challenging issues. We need the help. Rural Oregon needs your help. Everyone wants healthy forests. There can be some disagreement on how to achieve the goal, but there is a common goal: healthy forests. In 2014, we will likely have an improving market for all of our wood products. Our manufacturing facilities are world-class. We have labor in waiting. The real question is, where will the timber come from? So what we need in 2014, we need predictable timber supply from public lands, state and federal. We need to promote harvest to sustainable levels on our state-owned forests. We need to increase the pace and scale of East Side restoration. And this will require us to modernize the federal management system so public timber can quickly and economically be delivered for sale. This is probably the biggest challenge we will face. And in the long haul, we need to increase our support for Oregon State University's College of Forestry and for our community college industry apprenticeship program. Thank you.